Hi, I'm Rick Steves. In this special program, I'll share practical, money-saving, experience-enhancing lessons I've learned from a lifetime of travel. In this talk, I'll share tips and tricks on stretching your travel dollar, avoiding crowds, eating and sleeping well, packing smart, and much more. After spending a third of my adult life living out of a carry-on-the-airplane-sized bag in Europe, I know exactly how you can enjoy maximum travel thrills for every mile, minute, and dollar on your next vacation. Thanks so much for joining us.
Ladies and gentlemen, Rick Steves!
Thank you. Thank you. I have a sense we have some eager travelers here, and what I'm so excited about is sharing with you the lessons I've learned from a lifetime of traveling through Europe. How many of you have been to Europe before? Let me see a show of hands here. Well-traveled crowd, and you're here for learning more information. Who's got a trip coming up that you're actually planning for in the next 10 or 15 years? Anybody? 2 weeks, all right. Well, I've learned so much that you can learn from other people's experiences and have a much better trip. Now, I've spent a good part of my life, I would say a third of my adult life, 4 months a year since I was a kid, living out of a small bag, hanging out with other people, experiencing Europe, and right from the start, it occurred to me that I just love European travel, and I also love teaching it. What I'm excited about today is sharing with you the fundamental skills so you can do this yourself. In my TV shows, I have an ethic where we never film anything that our viewers can't do themselves. I just love the thought that anybody can travel this way if they can just expect themselves to be traveling smart. Now, I'm in Europe for 4 months out of the year, every year for the last 30 years. April and May in the Mediterranean, then I go home in June, and then I go back July and August north of the Alps. It just makes sense when you're traveling to think about the climate, think about the crowds. If you're in the Mediterranean, it's very hot and crowded in the summer, do it in the spring or fall. If you're going north of the Alps, Scandinavia, Britain, Ireland, frankly, I want crowds. You want crowds there, you want good weather, you want long days. I would go in July and August. Now, when I'm in Europe, I'm out there most of the time on my own, unless I'm filming or leading one of our tours. Usually I'm on my own researching, and my whole idea is to make mistakes. Take careful notes. Learn from those mistakes. When I get ripped off, I celebrate because they don't know who they just ripped off. I'm going to learn that scam, and I'm going to take it home and tell everybody about it. So I just think it's so important because your trip is important. It's a huge investment of time and money, and you can go over there tomorrow without any planning and have a reasonable time, but you can have the trip of a lifetime. So we've been working really hard. We've written guidebooks for every country in Europe and so on. But today, what I want to do is distill the lessons of a lifetime of traveling in Europe into one packed hour with all sorts of practical skills. So you can learn from my experience and enjoy maximum travel thrills for every mile, minute, and dollar on your next vacation. So thank you so much for being here. And our talk is going to cover trip planning, packing, safety, communication, transportation, eating, sleeping, and, very important, avoiding crowds. Right off the bat, something really important is planning. The more you plan, the better you're going to use your time over there. And planning is a fun dimension of the whole experience. Get into the mood of your trip ahead of time. Recreational reading, recreational movie going. Go to their friends. Anybody who's been to Europe loves to show their photographs. I mean, you're a chance for them to show off. Learn from people. And think about the style of trip you want to have. I've learned there's some very fundamental elements of travel that carbonate the experience. Most importantly, people. If you're not meeting people in your travels, it's going to be a flat kind of experience. You're going to see cultural cliches on stage, you're going to go to dead buildings, and you're going to go back to the hotel and wonder, is there good Wi-Fi, you know? You got to just get out there and meet the people. When I'm leading a tour, making a TV show, researching a guidebook, or even on my own vacation, I mark the quality of the experiences I'm putting together by how many real people are my travelers meeting. When I'm in Spain, in a little bar or cafe, I'll sit right up at the bar and meet this guy. He'll speak English, and he'll be eager to explain to me what's in that plate of peppers. This is pimiento de padrón, and in Spain it's like Russian roulette for your taste buds. One of them is very hot. And if you don't talk to the people, you don't know what's going on. Experiences, that's the other thing. I've noticed these days when we're selling tours and selling guidebooks and so on, people are looking for experiences. They've seen the buildings. They want to roll up their sleeves and get their fingers dirty in that local culture. You can do that too, but your attitude has to be, if something comes to you as an experience, even if it's out of your comfort zone, the answer is yes. Would you like some escargot? No. What's the answer? Yes. At least one. As a tour guide, I'm just doing a lousy job if I have a group in France and everybody doesn't try at least one escargot. So here we have a dozen escargot. You got a family of 4? Don't make everybody eat a whole plate, but buy a plate and let's all try it. You'd be surprised how many things you will enjoy that you didn't think you would enjoy. There are experiences all over the place that really distinguish a good trip. The other thing that's important is, where are you going to go? You're going to go to the famous places, that's fine. But find places that have no promotional budgets. Places that are just going through another century. There are amazing hill towns. I just love the hill towns in Italy. Now this place is called Civita di Bagnoregio. Can you imagine walking up that donkey path? Oh my goodness, it just never gets old. Now, all over Europe, you can find these places that are somehow keeping their heads above the flood of the 20th century. And that's your challenge when you do your planning. Don't just go to the most promoted places. Find places that have missed the modern boat. Now, when we look at a town like this is in the Cinque Terre, my favorite town on my favorite stretch of the Italian Riviera, Vernazza. When we look at this town, I want you to recognize there's no modern buildings there, right? It's a national park. Nobody is allowed to change any of their buildings. This is pure old world Italy. And when you go there, you're going to find that there are no comfortable hotels. This is very good news, because it keeps away the most obnoxious slice of the traveling public, people who insist on comfortable hotels. They're over in Portofino complaining about traffic jams and bad prices and mean service. And while you're here, surrounded by vineyards, gazing out at the twinkling Mediterranean, enjoying wine that was made right there outside of the village. If you can put up with the funky little bed and breakfast here, you've got Italy in your laps. This is fundamental. This is what I call going through the back door. Now, I've showed you some little towns, and little towns can fall through the cracks and be exciting, and you want to weave those into your itineraries. Of course, you need to see the big famous things too. But if all I had to talk about was the Acropolis, I'd really have no business gathering us all together today. We know to see that. I would recommend, when you do go to a place like the Acropolis, you should anticipate crowds. How are you going to enjoy it without the crowds? When I look at this slide, it comes with a soundtrack, because it seems like whenever I go to the Acropolis, I hear the whistle of the guard saying, "Monsieur, monsieur, mister, get away, we're closed now, you have to go." I'm the last one on that hill. And there's nobody there but me and the wonders of the Parthenon and vast views of Athens and the setting sun. That's a great experience. There are no crowds when you come early or when you go late. Also, you're going to see famous sites like the windmills and the wooden shoes, of course, when you go to Holland. But when you go there, understand what it's all about. Everybody's going to see a windmill. Climb up that windmill and feel the oak beams creaking as the wind turns those sails. And then check out that Archimedes screw in the foreground. And imagine, centuries ago, the innovation when the Dutch people harnessed the wind to turn the Archimedes screw to pump the water from the lowlands over the dike and reclaim that land and create their country. You see, you don't need to be a scholar, but that little bit of information helps you really get excited about what you're looking at. Now, I've showed you little towns. I want to remind you there's a lot of big towns that are very touristy, and you're going to go to them because you got to go to Salzburg when you're in Austria. Don't go to touristy places and complain about the tourist crowds. Go to touristy places and celebrate the touristiness of it. It's fun. I love Salzburg. It's Mozart town. It's Julie Andrews. It's Sound of Music. But so many people go to Salzburg, complain about the crowds, and the next morning they sign up on the Sound of Music bus tour. They're going to be rolling through the foothills of the Alps with 40 Japanese and American tourists singing Do Adair, complaining about the tourist crowds. You put yourself into the most touristy possible thing, and you wonder why it's touristy. So we are tourists, you know. We want to do the lonely goat herd when we're there, all right? Do that, have fun, but complement that touristy experience with something just 2 hours away. Go south, into the mountains, find a cute little village, bullied onto a ledge between a mountain and a lake, and commune with nature with local Austrians. This happens to be a town called Hallstatt. I just absolutely love Hallstatt. Big cities with great art, and lots of culture, and lots of sightseeing, they're going to be crowded and touristy. We don't veto it just because it's got tourist crowds, but we think of enjoying it in a way that minimizes those tourist crowds. Toledo, a great example. Toledo is the historic, spiritual, and artistic capital of Spain. The modern capital is Madrid, about an hour to the north. Now, when you go to Toledo in the middle of the day, it's going to be mobbed with tourists. But at night, the tourists retreat 1 hour north to the predictable plumbing of their high-rise hotels. The locals have made their money, they push their postcard racks away, and they come out very relaxed, ready to do their paseo thing. El Greco would recognize his hometown of Toledo after dark. So what we want to do is be there after dark. Be there early, be there late. Plan your sightseeing so when you're in touristy areas, avoid that 10 o'clock to 4 o'clock tour group mob time, okay? That's when the cruise groups come in, that's when the big bus groups come in, and so on, all over Europe. We can find touristy places are all ours if we get up early and stay out late. They're just much more atmospheric that way. If you go to Germany, I'm sure you're going to go to Rothenburg an der Tauber. It's the best medieval walled town in Germany. During the middle of the day, mobbed with tour groups coming in from Frankfurt and Munich, probably the greatest concentration of tourists anywhere, shopping those cobbled lanes in cute little Rothenburg. But at night, they're back in the big cities. The local people are out and relaxed. The ramparts are floodlit, and it's you with this delightful little remnant of feudal Germany. Spend the night and be out and about. Venice, another good example. Venice is mobbed with tourists. In fact, one reason I think Venice is sinking is because it just wasn't built to support all those tourist crowds. But I would say the vast majority of the tourists in Venice, which, by the way, is just a small town of 60,000 people, inundated with far more tourists every day. It's rush hour. They come in and they go out. In the morning, the boats coming in are packed with tourists, and the boats going out are empty. At night, it flip-flops. Everybody's going out. The tour groups stay on the mainland, 10 miles inland, where tour organizers can get cheaper hotels, where they're all cookie-cutter square and modern so there's no complaints, and where they're stuck in the middle of nowhere so the tour can sell you the optional sightseeing tour to get into Venice. Do you see what I mean? Everything encourages tour organizers to not pay extra for funky hotels where the elevators don't work in downtown because it costs too much, they get more complaints, and people can step out the door and be in Venice without having to pay extra for the guided tour. Do you see what I mean if you're on an organized tour? So, read the tourist information. They're going to say you're going to sleep in the Venice area. That could be halfway to Bologna, all right? Now, I'm a sucker for the old medieval stuff. I love it. And I can see half-timbered villages and thatched roofs and ruined castles till the cows come home and think I'm having a great time. But I am mindful of the fact that Germany is not sitting on a stump wearing lederhosen and yodeling. Much as I'd like it to be, Germany is a no-nonsense, lean and mean business machine. It's the size of Montana, with roughly 1/4 of our population and 1/4 of our gross national product. I mean, it is a lean and mean business machine. And we owe it to ourselves to go to a no-nonsense German city just to feel the pulse of today's urban Germany. This is Berlin. Berlin is an amazing city. It's the most changed city in Europe. A generation ago, if you walked across this street, they would shoot you because that was the Berlin Wall. Today, there's no hint of the Berlin Wall, just a pipe in the pavement and American tourists going, hey, I'm in the East and the West at the same time. Where's Checkpoint Charlie? Well, that's fun. But today's Germany is looking forward, and we owe it to ourselves, especially with all the challenges we have today in our country, to see how other societies are organizing their urban world. It's quite inspirational. When we plan our itinerary, and this is really fun, you've got options, and it's really important for you to be engaged and proactive and not just go into the cliches. Here's a good example. A lot of people, when they're thinking about Germany, they want to go to castles. If you think Germany, castles, what river comes to mind? The Rhine, okay? The Rhine River. It's got all those famous castles. Your image of the Rhine, on the other hand, I think is the little sister of the Rhine, the Mosel, M-O-S-E-L. This is the Mosel here. It's winding, it's got vineyards, it's got half-timbered villages, it's got ruined castles galore, and it doesn't have all the traffic and the noise and the industry. The Rhine is exciting, but it's muscular. And if you want a sleepy, little laid-back version of the Rhine, the Mosel. It's not as highly promoted as the Rhine. It's worth knowing about. And on the Mosel, you will find my favorite castle anywhere in Germany, Berg Eltz, E-L-T-Z. Now, when we look at Berg Eltz, we're looking at feudalism. 700 years old, built when Germany, the size of Montana, was 200 or 300 independent little petty fiefdoms, dukedoms, kingdoms, and so on. each with its own pride, its own dialect, its own weights and measures, its own wall and curfews, okay? And there's so much diversity in feudal Europe and so much quirky history to see. We need to understand what feudalism is before we go to this castle. If you step into that castle and know just the basics of feudalism, this castle will be a much more interesting experience. Happens to be the best castle interior anywhere in Germany. Now, this castle is an altogether different slice of the German story of castle architecture and so on. This is romantic, built in the late 1900s. For 4 or 5 trips, I remember going to Neuschwanstein, popularly known as Mad Ludwig's Castle, thinking it's medieval. I mean, it's pointy. I really thought anything that was pointy was medieval. And then I realized that the pointiest stuff is actually faux medieval, over-the-top medieval, neo-medieval. Have you heard neo-Gothic, neo-Romanesque, and so on? And that's all from the late 1800s. If you think about the pointiest stuff in Europe, the pointy church on the main square in Prague, you guys have been there, the pointy castle in Segovia, the pointy Halls of Parliament in Big Ben, the pointy skyline in Bruges, of course the pointy castle of Mad King Ludwig in Bavaria, they're all made in the same generation, and that's the same generation as the Eiffel Tower. So there's an example about how that's called Romanticism. Romanticism is a romantic response to the intellectual movement of the Revolutionary Age, the French Revolution and so on. So I'm just reminding you, you don't need to be a scholar, but if you know what Romanticism is, a third of your sightseeing takes on meaning. And I speak from experience. I didn't know about that for a decade, and I missed all sorts of understanding. Before your trip, get a handle on this stuff. One of my favorite kinds of castles is a ruined castle. Here, with a little imagination, you're under attack 1,000 years ago in Portugal. There are ruined castles rotting away unnoticed all over Europe, from Finland to Portugal to Israel. And our challenge is to find these things. I do want to remind you that free things are not promoted, right? We're all in the business. It's tourism. They want our money. We're consumers. Any information that comes to you is coming to you with an agenda. They want to sell you that stuff. Something that's just free on a hilltop is going to be ignored from an advertising point of view. You owe it to your vacation to give the free things a fair consideration as well as the paid commercial ventures, right? Now, when you walk down the main street in Amsterdam, you'll come to something that looks like a tourist information office. It's not. It's a box office selling highly commissionable, tacky commercial ventures as if they're important museums. The clueless, naive, hen party, stag party, business traveler, in Amsterdam for 2 days, walk down Damrak, they're going to see this sign and they go, oh, here's the things we got to do, dear. We're going to go to the Madame Tussauds. We're going to go to the Body Works, the Ice Bar, the Torture Dungeon, and the Heineken beer experience. We've seen Amsterdam. Well, that's fun stuff, but it's quite expensive. And you're missing Anne Frank. Where's Van Gogh? Where's Rembrandt? Where's the Rijksmuseum? Where's the Houseboat Museum? There is so much else to see that are highbrow national museums that don't have these gimmicky promotional budgets. In your hotel lobby, all those little flyers you see, it's worth looking at them, but they pay good money to get there in order for you to go there because they want to make money off of you. You are consumers. They want your money. You got to have a little screen as information comes at you. Is this really what I want to do on my vacation? Or is this being effectively advertised because it's quite profitable? When you are traveling, for us to step into these amazing buildings and be properly wowed by them is so exciting. And I know as a tour guide for 25 years, I was bringing people to these great sites, and how much you bring with you determines how much you get out of it. You can step into the St. Peters Basilica, the greatest church on earth, and you can just kind of go, yeah, it's big. Or like I used to, you can go, this is disgusting. Who paid for all this stuff? I mean, park your Protestant sword at the door. If you're not a Roman Catholic, become one as you step into St. Peter's Basilica. It's a much nicer experience. As a good Lutheran, I can tell you, it doesn't work to be a Lutheran in St. Peter's, okay? Now, you get into St. Peter's, or you get into any great thing, and you're surrounded by art and symbolism and meaning. You go to St. Peter's Basilica, you see this guy with a bushy beard and a big key. Everywhere, there's a guy with a bushy beard and a big key. That's how we know St. Peter. He has the keys to heaven, and he's identified by a big bushy beard. It's amazing to me how many people don't know that. Who's this guy with the bushy beard? There's another guy. He's got a big, keen, and bushy beard. Understand. And then you look up above and you see in the mosaic, you are Peter. And upon this rock I will build my church. Why is the Bishop of Rome the Pope? It's because St. Peter was martyred there. It was a Roman chariot race course long before there was a church there. And his followers took him up to a little cemetery, buried him there. 300 years later, the Roman emperor becomes Christian, and they can build a big church around it and worship in the open, and that was the beginning of the Pope and St. Peter's and the Vatican. It's exciting when you know a little bit about that. And as a tour guide and a travel teacher, it's really fun to have smart people steep on the learning curve. So you don't need to get a lot out of your sightseeing, but a lot of people are wondering about, give me a budget tip. Here's a budget tip. Know more about what you're going to see, and it's going to be twice as rewarding when you pay to see it. When we look at this is do you know about this, the famous aqueduct in southern France? It's not really an aqueduct. It's the most scenic bridge in a 30-mile long aqueduct built 1,800 years ago by the Romans, engineered so that water would flow using gravity instead of the sweat of peasants into the great city of Nimes. Engineered so the water drops 1 inch every 100 yards for 30 miles. Wow. There's a little tiny square river on the top of that goes 30 miles. Can you imagine when you go to, after viewing this, go to Nimes and look at the end of this 30-mile long structure. And imagine the jubilation on that day when water gushes into Nimes. Oh, we got beat by Rome, that was a drag, but now we're on the winning team and we got running water. Hey! We got stability, you know? We got roads. Try to get a sense of what you're looking at. Humanize it. When you go to Nimes, where that aqueduct ends, you can see the distribution well, where the water gushes in. You can actually see a little bit of economic justice or social justice. You can see the lowest pipes, when there was not a lot of water, would go to power the life-giving wells for the neighborhoods. And then the higher pipes, when there was an abundance of water, would go to power the decorative fountains in rich people's courtyards. Now, that's a dimension to that makes it quite a lot more real. And there's that realism all over the place as we travel thoughtfully. As sightseers, as tourists, we need to know what our options are. You're going to see all the famous stuff, of course. But if you want to see human bones, you got to do a little studying. A lot of people want to see human bones. They go to the catacombs in Rome. No bones in the catacombs of Rome. You messed up. You got to know the word Capuchin. The Capuchin monks buried their dead brothers, and 100 years later, the flesh is all gone. It's just the bones, and then they decorate with the bones. And you can go into their crypt and see all these decorative bone works by the Capuchins. Whatever you're interested in, do your studying. If you're really into French fries, there's a museum for you. If you're really into the Olympics, there's an amazing museum I was just at in Lausanne in Switzerland. If you're into marijuana, there's a good museum for you. If you're into the Beatles, if you're into leprosy, you go to Bergen and you have a fascination with leprosy, and you leave Bergen without knowing Dr. Hansen's hospital is right there. It's an amazing thing. What about art done by people who were locked up because they were considered criminally insane? It's a fascinating museum. You'll see that if you know where to look as you're traveling around Switzerland. So do your studying and make sure you know what are the odd, quirky museums that are top quality, but with a very narrow market. We've all got these interests, some of them that we don't even tell our friends about, and you can see museums about this stuff in your travels. Another trick I think very important is find a way to become a temporary local in so many ways. I mean, imagine a tailgate party here outside of a stadium, how Americana that is if you're a European tourist. You can do the same thing in Europe. Go to a soccer game. I mean, boy, to go to a soccer game, you really feel the energy of it. I was in Ireland, I went to a hurling match, and it was enthusiastic. Hurling is like, it's a rough, fast game. It's like airborne hockey with no injury timeouts. And I learned a lot of new ways to swear with an Irish accent at that hurling match. So you can find plenty of ways to connect with the locals by doing things that locals do. The obvious thing is the evening stroll, right? In Spain, it's the paseo. In Italy, it's the passeggiata. I asked when I check into a hotel generally, where do people stroll in the evening? I want to be there. Take a siesta if you have to, but be out strolling. That's where you feel the pulse of the local community. In these cute little Italian towns, the old men, they've been strolling together for 40 years, ever since they got out of school. It's called the laps, the vasca. They go from the parking lot down to the beach, seeing all their friends, gossiping and so on, and back up to the parking lot, doing their laps. It's just every tourist is welcome. That's where it's happening. You go to the main square in Salamanca, it's the greatest scene in Spain, the paseo. And early in the evening, all the boys are going counterclockwise. All the girls are going clockwise. The old ladies who can't walk so well anymore, they're up in the windows looking down, just disgusted at how trashy the girls are dressing this year. I mean, there's so much going on in the streets if you're there to enjoy it. If you'd rather just sit and have a drink and watch the parade, you can do that. That's the aperitivo. And this is the most expensive square in Siena, Il Campo. And I'll never forget spending 45 minutes here after a busy day of sightseeing. I'm not a happy hour kind of person normally, but when I'm traveling, I like to enjoy the scene. Spend too much for a cup of coffee or a drink, because you're right there in the best real estate around, and watch the parade of life go by. This is 11 euros for 2 cocktails, and it comes with munchies. It's about $1 a euro or so. A euro is roughly $1.20. I like to just think of it as $1 a euro. It makes it more fun. And then I get home and everything cost me 20% more than I thought, but I really had a good time until then. So, you know, roughly $1 a euro, 12 euros, $6 per drink, and I get this great show. That's good travel. Be a cultural chameleon. I'm really into this. I love to just morph from one country to the next. I don't ever think chocolate is to die for, unless I'm in Belgium. And then chocolate is to die for. And I go to the finest chocolaterias and I talk to people and I savor it. I have never gone home in Seattle where I live after a long day of work and thought, you know, I feel like a nice glass of ouzo. Just, it's inconceivable. But every day when I'm in Greece, on the Greek islands, after a long day, the sun's going down, I want an ouzo. I just need an ouzo. Pour the water, the beautiful cloudiness, oh, your little munchies, and you're part of the scene. When I'm in Prague, the best beer in Europe, if you like a Pilsner, and you just enjoy the beer scene in Prague. If I'm in Belgium for a beer, I want that much milkshakey kind of monk-made beer. When I'm in Tuscany, I want a good, full-bodied, it's one of the few Italian words I know, corposo, vino rosso, a full-bodied red wine. So tea makes no sense at all to me. I don't know when the last time I had tea in this hemisphere was. But when I'm in England, a spot of tea. Yeah, Bob's your uncle, all right? So become a temporary local. Now, we have some exciting natural wonders here in the United States. But the great thing about Europe's natural wonders is they are so accessible. It's an important part of your travels. She looks pretty rugged, but she's not. She rode the lift up for breakfast. I'm standing on the edge of a revolving restaurant to take this photograph filled with, women in high heel shoes who just rode the lift up for the beautiful view. And anybody can get to the top of the Alps, and then you can walk along the ridge. And that is so accessible. Ride the lift up, have breakfast, and then you can hike or frolic all the way across the Alps. Can you imagine tight roping on a ridge? I mean, actually tight roping on a ridge for 3 hours. You didn't get sweaty. You rode the lift up, and it's level. On one side, you got lakes stretching all the way to Germany. On the other side, you got the most incredible alpine panorama anywhere, the Eiger, Monk, and Jungfrau. And ahead of you, you hear the long legato tones of an Alp horn announcing that the helicopter-stocked mountain hut is open. It's just around the corner, and the coffee schnapps is on. That's good travel. Anybody can have it. You don't even need to be a serious hiker. Do your studying, get up early. It's nice and crisp and clear usually in the morning before it clouds up in the afternoon. And as you are enjoying nature, you find plenty of ways to eat and sleep up there. You'll come to mountain huts. Wherever there are mountains, there are mountain huts. This place happens to be in the most traditional part of Switzerland, Appenzell. It's specifically Ebenalp, E-B-E-N-A-L-P. Don't need to write it down. You can get a guidebook that covers all of that. That's what guidebooks are for. But I love this place. It's one of my favorite listings in my Switzerland guidebook. And when somebody has that information, they know that this place is run by Benny and Claudia. They know you can go milk the goats with the kids before dinner. They know that after dinner, the Swiss hikers love to teach the American hikers how to play the spoons and yodel. They brought their piano in by helicopter. And don't forget to check out the guest book, because German hikers and Swiss hikers have been doodling it since the 1960s. It's just a beautiful experience. It's cheap. It's just rainwater. You're not going to get much of a shower, but you're experiencing Switzerland. You see, you can have those experiences. You need good information. That's critical. If you're basing your trip on a borrowed copy of some guidebook 5 years old, you save 20 bucks on the guidebook, but you don't have up-to-date information. You won't know when you're in Rome at the Victor Emmanuel Monument, the building everybody loves to hate because it's a relatively modern monstrosity on top of precious antiquities, that you can ride an elevator that's been retrofitted in the back of it up to the top, And for 10 bucks, you can enjoy the greatest view in Rome, 360 degrees, looking down on the Forum, and you don't have to look at the building you're standing on. Now, I show this slide because I want to remind you it's fun to sort through your limited time, your unlimited interests, and come up with a smart itinerary. It's beyond the scope of this talk, but if you look at this, you can see here is a good example of an aggressive 3-week look at the best of Europe. This is what I consider the best 3,000 miles in 3 weeks in Europe. It's open jaws. That means flying into one city and out of another city. A lot of people just think you got to fly in and out of the same city. It's been 10 years since I flew in and out of the same city. Start in one spot and go to the other, leave from the other spot. You don't need to waste time and money getting back to where you started. You're starting mild and working into more challenging areas. Don't start in Italy. Start in Holland, and then Germany, and then you work your way into Italy. It finishes with a finale in Paris, which makes a lot of sense. You'll notice the numbers on there. That's how many nights you'd spend in each stop. Of course, this is fast travel. Some people would scoff at that and say you got to stay at least 4 days, but you got 3 weeks and you want to see it all, and this is the best maximum speed trip that I could design. I would highly advise against one-night stands. Minimize one-night stand. That's where you get frenzied and it just becomes a kind of a chore. 2 nights in a row, that's the minimum, and you'll see on this itinerary, it's mostly 2 nights in a row. Heavy on Italy, because Italy is my favorite country. You could do that in 3 weeks if you wanted to. Now, you got to decide, are you going to take a tour or are you going to go on your own? No right or wrong answer. For some people, tours are great, and for some people, they should go on their own. Remember, many people take a tour because they're told they can't do it on their own. You know, you can do it on your own. Anybody smart enough to be here today has what it takes up here to be their own tour guide, all right? You've qualified. But a tour organizes the hotels, it does the driving for you, and so on, and it can be a very good value. But study the tour and understand that the standard operating procedure for tours these days is to give you a no-profit price to get you on the bus. And then they pack it with 50 people on a 50-seat bus because the profit will be in the end. And in order to get that profit, they've got to sell you things. They got to keep you away from the town center to charge you to get in with the optional sightseeing tours. The guide is generally paid a token wage, sometimes no wage at all, and makes the lion's share of his income selling you things for kickbacks and angling for tips. Getting tips, selling you sightseeing for commissions, and taking you shopping for kickbacks. That's not criminal, but as consumers, you should know what's going on. Here's a tip. If you don't want to do the driving, and if you just want a bunch of low-stress, forgettable hotels all organized in advance, take the cheapest tour you can find, bus tour, that has an itinerary that you like, and promise yourself you will only think of it as a bus pass that comes with hotels. It's a no-profit thing. You're going to be freeloading on that tour company, all right? Equip yourself with a guidebook. Function as an independent traveler with letting them do the driving, and you've got your hotels, and it's cheaper than youth hosteling, really, when you look at it carefully. You'd pay more just for the hotel room than you're paying for the whole day package with the transportation in the room included. I am all about people going on their own. I really believe anybody who wants to be their own tour guide can, but it's work. You got to drive, you got to park, you got to arrange the hotels, and so on. So you got to do some studying on that. My whole work with my 100 workmates up in Seattle is to make these guidebooks. Our guidebooks originated as the handbooks for the tours that we lead. I had tours before I had guidebooks, and I had the handbooks laying around in my classes. During the breaks, I'd hope people would thumb through the book and like what they see and take the tour. Time and time again, they thumbed through the handbook, liked what they see, and they took the handbook. It occurred to me, these little tour handbooks are driving decent people to theft. They should be available for purchase. So we decided to write the guidebooks, putting everything we knew about doing the tours into the guidebooks so people could literally buy the book and do our tours without us. The point is there are a lot of good guidebooks. And if you are just a good student and you pick the right guidebook, and there's great guidebooks for different styles. I mean, I write guidebooks and other people write guidebooks that I have huge respect for. Figure out what's your style of travel, use that guidebook and expect it to work, and you will travel more smoothly. I mean, putting a million tabs in it, I think that's going overboard, but those guidebooks do make a big difference. One thing I've put a lot of energy into lately is creating an app just out of my passion for providing guided tours. Rick Steves Out of Europe is absolutely free. You don't need my books or anything like that. You just download it, and then you choose which tours you want, and you listen to them offline when you're in Europe. And when you're there, right in the middle of whatever wonderful, this is the Frari Church in Venice, or in the Sistine Chapel, or in the Pantheon, to have somebody who's been there before sort through all the information and explain it to you and bring it to life, rather than reading and looking up, it's a beautiful thing. Remember, as you travel, when you equip yourself with information and expect yourself to travel smart, you will have a very rewarding and economic experience. If there's one tip that you take seriously that'll really help your travels, I think it's the importance of packing light. You do not have a pack horse. If you do, you're abusing your spouse. Now, I've been living out of a 9 by 22 by 14 inch carry in the airplane size suitcase for a third of my adult life. And it's no hardship. It's enlightened. If I had Sherpas, I would set them free. Think about it. You'll never meet anybody who after five trips brags, every year I pack heavier. With experience, you get serious about the beauty of packing light. In Europe, you'll find two kinds of travelers, those who pack light and those who wished they packed light. You're going to be wanting to be mobile. You want to get up to that hill and stay in a beautiful little B&B with a view of the valley, you're going to have to get up. There's no taxi that takes you there. There are good wheelie bags, and there are fit travelers that can get up there. One of the realities of travel, almost any way you go, you have to leave the hotel and get to your car, get to the bus, get to the train station. If you look at this, you can see some people have wheelie bags. Some people carry their bags on their back, but everybody's walking with their own gear. All over Europe, there are cities like Florence that have become traffic-free, and you can no longer get the bus to the hotel. It's a blessing that Florence is traffic-free, but the downside is you got to carry your bag 4 blocks instead of parking right at the hotel. So that's just a reality today. And when I look at the people struggling with their gear, I wonder, how can somebody need so much stuff? This is what I live out of for 2 months at a stretch. 9 by 22 by 14 inches. It's a carry on the airplane size bag. I've got it right here. And this is my home for a third of my adult life. Now, there's all sorts of companies that make great bags this dimension. That's as big as you can carry onto an airplane. This has a beautiful configuration of pockets, compression straps on the side. I like it because it's got padded shoulder straps that can zip away, so it can be a soft-sided suitcase, or you can reveal the padded shoulder straps and then you can wear it on your back. I use it exclusively as a backpack. Now, the day will come when I'm not going to be strong enough to carry it on my back, and I will be wheeling my gear around Europe. Nothing wrong with that. Most of the women in my office use wheelie bags. A lot of the guys do. For the time being, I'm still hanging it on my back. But this is my home. And the point is, this is your self-imposed limit. 9 by 22 by 14 inches, as big as you can carry onto the airplane. And you see a lot of people with these kind of bags. There's many companies that make these bags. And the squishy ones are nice from an airplane point of view because you can almost always get it overhead. I rarely have to check my bag when I'm flying around. Here are 6 people who happen to be taking one of our tours, and all of them have the roller version of the bag I just demonstrated. Now, for these people, we took 20,000 people on our tours last year. None of them were allowed to take any more than a carry-on-the-airplane size bag on the tour, 9 by 22 by 14 inches. Now, for a lot of them, that was a radical concept. What, 9 by 22 by 14 inches? That was my cosmetics kit. No, that's everything. This is tough love, baby. And we talked about it. I visit with them a week into the trip, and I've been doing this for decades. I've never had anybody upset with me for making them pack light. Consider this. Spread everything out on the living room floor with your travel partner before your trip. Look at each item critically. Hold it up. Ask yourself, will I use this snorkel and fins enough to feel good about carrying it through Europe? Not will I use it, it'll be fun on the beach in Greece, but will you use it enough to feel good about carrying it through the Swiss Alps? Leave it home, all right? Load everything up, go downtown, walk around the block with your gear and see what it's like, and then go home and get real. You'll be thankful for that. As far as changing money goes, it's easy these days. You just have your debit card, your credit card, and you use ATMs, and you get money at the beautiful bank-to-bank rate instead of the miserable tourist-to-teller rate, and most of Europe has the same coins in their pocket. 300 million people with the euro. I just love that. You cross a border, you still have the same money. So, changing money is not an issue these days. Safety is an issue. And when we go to Europe, I want to remind you, we are targeted by thieves. We are targeted by thieves. Thieves target Americans not because they're mean, but because they're smart. They know we're the people with all the good stuff in our purses and in our wallets. A lot of times a beggar will come up to you and ask for €1. She's got a sad story. She's got a beautiful baby. She says, €1? She really wants your wallet. It sounds kind of harsh, but assume that the beggars are pickpockets and begging is their front, because tourists are targeted. They hang out at the museums. I know just where to watch the local street thieves picking the pockets of the tourists, all right? When you're on a bus, if you're on the bus that all the tourists are on, there's going to be pickpockets. There's a pickpocket right there. I observed her for 45 minutes in Lisbon this last year, eyeing different victims, and she makes her living by grabbing the bags or the wallets of sloppy people. So you want to not be vulnerable. That means button it up, zip it up, or wear a money belt. I really like a money belt when I'm traveling. In fact, I'm wearing one right now. Have you noticed? No, I even forgot about it. The money belt is the peace of mind. Let me show you where I keep my money belt. Okay, this is my money belt. I've been wearing it all day. I haven't even thought about it. And when I'm traveling and I want to be safe, this is where I keep my essential stuff. My credit card, my passport, and so on. A related issue is, when it comes to safety, is terrorism. And a lot of Americans have a big concern about terrorism. When you go to Europe, you're going to see some pretty serious security in front of all the precious soft targets. I love to see the army out these days, jeeps and camouflage soldiers standing in front of St. Francis Basilica in Assisi and so on. It's there, and that's for good. Now, I really want to encourage you to not confuse risk and fear. Here in our country, we're a very fearful nation right now. It's charming to think that news is news, but on commercial media, news is entertainment masquerading as news. And if it's all a crisis, they make more money in their ads, and this is just amping up, and we are the victims of that. Do you remember when we first started traveling, people said, bon voyage? Now what do they say? Have a safe trip. We'll pray for you. Are you sure you want to go over there, considering all that's happening? When somebody tells me have a safe trip, I'm inclined to say, well, you have a safe stay at home. Because where I'm going is safer than where you're staying. If you understood the statistics, and I know statistics are optional these days, but if you decided to understand the statistics, and you knew what those statistics were, and if you care about your loved ones, you would take them to Europe tomorrow. This is how I sell tours. We lose 1,000 people to homicides every month in our country. Every month, 1,000 people. In Europe, 12 million Americans go every year and 12 million come back. If one is killed tomorrow, that's tragic, but it doesn't make it scary. It doesn't make it dangerous. It's dangerous to stay here. Europeans laugh out loud when they hear that Americans are staying home for safety reasons. Fear is for people who don't get out very much. The flip side of fear is understanding, and we gain understanding when we travel. And when we travel, we get to know the rest of the world. We gain an empathy for the other 96% of humanity, and we come home with that much better understanding. And that makes us safer. Not staying home and building walls, but traveling, getting to know the rest of the world, and then coming home. That's one reason I am committed to keeping America traveling. Thank you for traveling. A way of life. Rest assured, in Europe, they're working very smart on their security. There was a horrible vehicle that killed people on Westminster Bridge. You go back now, and there are barricades that keep the vehicles off the sidewalk. 2 Bastille days ago, a horrible van killed 80 people in Nice on the Promenade des Anglais. Today, there are these beefy white bollards there that keep the vehicles off so people can walk and bike safely on their promenade. Just this year, I was at Oktoberfest. I love Oktoberfest. And like the palio, like the running of the bulls, like anything, you've got it cordoned off now with police and security. That's how you get into Oktoberfest. You have your bag checked before you go inside. And when you get inside, this is German-style security. At every intersection in the fairground, you've got a literal circle of police keeping an eye on every direction at every moment. And we're having fun, all right? So this is important, that we go over there, celebrate the security, recognize the value for us to get out there and better understand the world, and travel. I just love traveling because it puts us in a mindset where we're more inclined to build bridges and less inclined to build walls. Now, when we're going to be connecting with Europeans, of course, we need to communicate. How are we going to, what about that language barrier we've heard so much about? I've been teaching ever since I was a kid, and I always start my language barrier talk by mentioning I speak only English. It's nothing to brag about, but it substantiates what I'm going to say. If I spoke all the languages and said, hey, it's easy, you can go over there and do fine, it would ring hollow. We speak the world's linguistic common denominator. If a Greek meets a Norwegian hiking in the Alps, how do they communicate? English. What Greek speaks Norwegian? I don't know if it even happens. Now, it's, I think, only polite not just to assume they will speak English, but to start by asking, parlez-vous anglais? Sprechen Sie English? If they say no, I do my best in their language. Generally, after a couple of sentences, they'll say, Actually, I do speak a very little bit of English. And I would be thankful if you speak clearly and slowly. So they're going to do you a favor by speaking your language. Do them a favor by speaking what Voice of America calls simple English. Enunciate every letter. Assume they are reading your lips, wishing it was written down, hoping to see every letter as it tumbles out of your mouth. No contractions, no slang, easy words, internationally understood words. Picture does not work. Photo does. Vacation does not work. Holiday does. I don't know why, but those words work better. Internationally understood words. If my car is broken in Portugal, I point to the vehicle and say, auto kaput. That would be understood. Remember, Europe is multilingual. If you are, in Croatia and you wonder what's in this packet, it's going to say sugar in 5 different languages, and English always makes it. Also remember, you need to make educated guesses. If you're not feeling very well somewhere in Scandinavia and you see a sign with a red cross on it pointing to Central Sick House. It's surprising to me how many Americans would bleed to death in the street corner looking for the word hospital. They've got these things, and sometimes they've got different words, so make an educated guess. Here's a sign that drivers will have to deal with. I can't say I get it right every time, but I go at it with a healthy sort of optimism that I can fake it, all right? You've got a sign in a parking lot here, and it says P for parking. When you're in Europe, you beat a heads up, and you know that a sign with a red slash on it probably means no. Well, it's a sign that says when and where you can park, so something's got to say days. The cross would be holy days, or festival days, and the crossed hammers would be work days. On work days, you can park there from 8 to 20. 24-hour clock, anything over 12, subtract 12 and add p.m. 20 minus 12, 8 p.m. So on work days from 8 until 8, you can park for 2 hours, and then it has that other thing, that little clock thing there. And if you're traveling in Europe, you recognize a little cardboard clock comes with your rental car. You set the time, put it on your dashboard, you're good for 2 hours. Now, if you happen to be there on a holy day, you read that and it says no parking from 8 to 8, and you can read the Italian under that because it says except residents with authorization. I certainly don't know those words, but it makes perfect sense that residents with authorization would be an exception. So we're making educated guesses. The average tourist would look at that and say, I don't get it. You can look at that and sort through it. And if you're really good at that, you can be a tour guide like me. Transportation in Europe is a delight. And when you're traveling these days, there are all sorts of ways that you can get around economically and efficiently. When I was a kid, nobody flew point to point in Europe. Flying was just ridiculously expensive. Now it's been deregulated, and before buying any long train ride, look into flying because routinely you can fly cheaper than you can take the train or the bus. Now, as far as trains go, Europe is investing in its train system beyond anything I've ever experienced elsewhere in the world. These are bullet trains. I was recently on a train in France. It was smooth, it was silent, there was beautiful pastoral views of the outside the window, and I noticed the speedometer only illuminated when it exceeded 300 kilometers an hour. That's 180 miles an hour. They were like embarrassed if they were going less than 180 miles an hour. 200 miles an hour, smooth, silent, and bam, you're in Paris. It's amazing how fast these trains are. And they are synchronized. If you're in a remote little community on a fjord in Norway, there'll be 4 trains a day coming in and 4 boats coordinated with the arrival of trains going out every day, all right? All over Europe, except in Italy, where the train seems to come in just in time to see the boat pulling out. All right? You will find that there's that beautiful coordination. When it comes to trains, there's a formula. Second class and first class, you'll pay 50% more per kilometer to go first class. Second class is more crowded and 4 seats across. First class is less crowded and 3 seats across. Nearly every train has both first and second class cars on them, each going precisely the same speed. I guess my point is, if you're just buying transportation, second class is a fine value. A big question is, how are you going to cobble all this transportation together on your trip? In the old days, people would just get a Eurail pass for all of Europe, you know? Well, that's become quite expensive, and people aren't doing the big, vast tour these days so much. And flights were ridiculously expensive, and train was a lot cheaper than cars. Things have changed in the last generation. Now it's so cheap to fly, I talk with my travel agent, and when I get my open jaw flight from the United States to Europe and back, I, at the same time, connect with the one-way flights. You can go Wizz Air or Ryanair or Discount Airlines for $30 or $40 a jump. Personally, I'd rather pay $100 and fly Lufthansa or Swiss Air or something from major airport to major airport direct and having hourly departures. My average one-way flight in Europe on major airlines is $100, and I think that's a great deal. As far as car or train, if you want to get to a beautiful site like this on the Isle of Skye in northern Scotland, you're going to be glad to have a car. You know, there's certain variables that encourage you to go by car or train, and you can almost analyze that. You could say, if I'm going from big city to big city to big city, I don't want a car. A car is an expensive headache in a big city. You're paying to rent it and you're paying to park it, and you're spending hours getting out of town through all that traffic when you can go from downtown to downtown effortlessly by train. So big city travel, train is better than car. If you're tooling around the countryside, that's where public transportation schedules can be frustrating, and you're glad to have your own mobility. If there's a group of you, 6 people in a station wagon or a minibus is far cheaper than 6 people buying 6 train tickets. 1 or 2 people go cheaper by train, 3 or more go cheaper by car. If you just don't buy this business of packing light, you should rent a car. You can even rent a trailer. But if you're going by train, you better be serious about being mobile, because you're going to do a lot of walking with your gear by train. So those are the variables that will help you choose. When you're in a big city, commit yourself to public transportation. I think this is really important. Public transit is just good style travel. It gets you out of the traffic jams. It's economic. It'll overall save you time than worrying about driving and so on. A lot of my European friends never get around to learning how to drive. It's not a political or environmental statement. They just, why have a car? Public transit is so good. I love the power public transit gives me. Another great thing about traveling in Europe is bike rental. I'm not much for big bike trips, you know, between cities, but I love to have a bike in a city when it makes sense. When I'm in Munich, when I'm in Stockholm, when I'm in Amsterdam, when I'm in Copenhagen, I just have a bike. I park it at my hotel, and I get around faster than if I had a taxi waiting for me. So if you like biking, think seriously about biking in towns that lend themselves to biking. It's a very European thing to do, and all over Europe, cities are becoming more and more bike-friendly. I want to talk about eating, and eating is very important in your travels, if you're like me, and you want to get a good value and a good experience, but you don't want to go broke when it comes to going to these restaurants. There are plenty of good ways to get a good value, and what I want to do is not go to the biggest neon sign that brags we speak English and accept Visa cards. I want to find a little hole-in-the-wall place run by somebody who's passionate about feeding locals. This shot is just reminds me of the value of getting a little mom and pop place. I call this woman Antipasta, all right? And she just loves to cook. And what you don't want is to go to the most expensive piece of real estate in town, Piazza Navona in Rome, and look for a big sign in English that says no frozen food. And then they have a printed menu in 5 languages that serves the same clichetic items all year long, regardless of the season. Everything's wrong about that. What I want is to find a handwritten menu that's small, and I want it to be in one language, because and I want it in a place that has low rent. A little hole-in-the-wall place, a mom and pop place, just big enough, 10 tables, so that mom can cook and dad can serve, or vice versa, right? So it's going to be a family run, one of these great, my favorite formula. And it's small menu because they're just cooking up what they can cook and sell profitably. It's one language because they're targeting locals, not tourists. And it's handwritten because it's shaped by what's in the market this week. This is so important. If there's a good, enthusiastic local crowd here and I got that menu, it's a fine value. Now, when we're thinking about choosing a good restaurant, I love the idea that if a smart eater goes to a good restaurant, that traveler can look at the menu and know what month it is and where they are by what's being served. Do you see what I mean? You want to eat with the season, and you want to eat locally. I don't like to go to fancy restaurants where I have to get a reservation long in advance and dress up and spend a fortune. I mean, occasionally that's kind of fun to do, but I want to eat well in like a foodie, small, creative place. And I like to go to a more expensive place, even on a tight budget, and order sparingly. That's much better than going to a mediocre place and ordering wild. Share the main course. Get a carafe of house wine instead of a bottle of fine wine. When it comes to dessert, get one and ask for 3 spoons. It's not classy, but they are thankful you're there, and it's a beautiful opportunity to have the fine presentation, the quality food, surrounded by elegant local people who are enjoying quality local cuisine. One of my passions lately is eating family style. In some cultures, it's just the way you do it, and it's easy. In other cultures, you have to push it a little more. But anywhere in Europe, you can order with your partner and ask for a small plate on the side. You order different things and you share them. You're not trying to win some award in sophistication here. You're a wide-eyed student of that culture, and you want to maximize the experience. A fun thing about ordering family style is you can have an arrangement with your travel partner that we're going to order one high-risk and one low-risk dish, and at worst, we'll split the edible one, okay? So do that family style business, and then you can try both of the pastas. Do that family style, and you will have more experience with not more cost. In Spain, they've got this wonderful tradition of tapas, and that's a great way to get out and experience the local cuisine. When it comes to lunch, I'm just looking for an expedient, healthy, efficient, economic meal. I don't need anything earth-shaking and memorable for the rest of my life. But when I have lunch, I would rather go to a local restaurant and eat just a local salad or something. This would be a good little restaurant in Venice. Rather than a sandwich shop or a fast food place, I'm having beautiful Venetian cuisine. All over Italy, you've got these antipasto bars that are just a wonderful, quick, and healthy lunch. Also remember, all over Europe, the industrial age market halls were getting run down because people are moving out into the suburbs and using the big supermarkets. To reinvigorate their traditional market halls, as is the case, I think, around the United States, these old-style iron and glass market halls are now becoming food courts. They still have the merchants selling the produce and the fish area and so on, but that was kind of getting run down, and now I find they're very enthusiastic and full of energy because they've got these little restaurants in there. They're quality restaurants, and if I think about it, every city in Europe now will have what was a rusty old marketplace that's now a very trendy place for lunch. In Florence, the Mercato Centrale is just wonderful. It's the best place to go for lunch, and you got a lot of choices, and you're eating with the locals. From a picnic point of view, you go to those markets, and you put together the healthy ingredients of a picnic, find a nice spot to enjoy that. It's always nutritious. If it's chosen well, it's local style, and that's a very good value for your lunch. When it comes to sleeping, I am glad I've got the help of slides to show you what I think is a good hotel, because I'm not talking about this. When I was a kid, this was a great spot. $4 for the bed. Actually, not really worth it. But, you know, there are lousy, non-government regulated flop houses in Europe, even these days, where you can get a bed for $25 and a kitten tossed in for no extra. And I'm not talking about that. What I'm talking about is an alternative to this. This is what defeats people who are on a budget, this big international class hotel. When I'm traveling around the United States on work, I love to have my big modern business class hotel. But I don't travel all the way to Europe to stay in an American-style hotel. I mean, think about it. Intercontinental, what are they telling you? The same everywhere. Intercontinental, designed for people who deep down inside wish they were not traveling. People who need a paper strap over the toilet promising them nobody has sat here yet. You can get transplanted American niceties, but you're going to pay American prices plus shipping for them. And I would rather really know where I am. When I'm in Switzerland, I want a Swiss chalet. I want to stay in Walter's Hotel. Beautiful place here. I'm on the balcony looking out at the avalanches on the north side of the Eiger. The peasants were up in the steep hills cutting hay all day, and they've gathered downstairs in the bar, and they're playing the spoons and yodeling and fighting. And I'm right there watching this thing, part of the scene. It's inexpensive, it's vivid. I know I'm in Switzerland. I like comfort. I like a safe central location. I like a friendly management, but I don't need a lot of the extra bells and whistles that lets a 2-star hotel become a 4-star hotel. 2 stars is good for me. I like a little hotel where I know the man and the woman, Francoise and Stefan, who run the place. It's on a pedestrian-only street, $6 from the Eiffel Tower. There's a market outside the door every morning. It costs $150 for the double. It's got an elevator. It comes with a nice breakfast. It's so French, when I step outside in the morning, I feel like I must have been a poodle in a previous life. It's not rocket science. You just need a good listing that knows your values and then consume at the level you want to consume. I like to have about this level of comfort. These days, you need air conditioning in the summer if you're going to be in the Mediterranean area because it is hot. I'll just warn you about that. I like to have a central location. I don't want a view. I want a quiet room. A lot of times they think you want a view. You'll pay more for the view, and it'll be on the square, and it's noisy at 1 o'clock in the morning. I'd rather walk 3 flights up further and be on the back. It's cheaper and it's quiet. A big option is bed and breakfast. Ever since I was a kid, B&B has been a big deal. Now, B&B has this wonderful new option with these crowdsourcing sites, Airbnb and so on, and people absolutely love it. This is a typical Airbnb apartment. This one's in Prague. Now, the big choice when you're going to B&B, whether you're doing it in the conventional way by just emailing places and so on, or going to a booking service like Airbnb, do you want to get to know the family and have a cozy time together, or are you just looking for an efficient bed with a key that you can come and go? There's no right or wrong, but you should know that because you can tell by the way they advertise, you can tell by the comments, this place is charming, you'll be having tea and cookies and watching TV together. She'll take you out on you can walk her dog with her or whatever. You know, there's plenty of ways you can, I've got a friend in this little town. Or it's just quiet, comfortable, modern, and cheap. You see, choose what you want. And again, there's no right or wrong. I just love to stay in people's homes. I'm boosting their humble family budget, and I'm right downtown. This is Mama Rabati. She's 3 blocks away from Michelangelo's David in Florence, and it's the best deal going in that category. One beautiful thing about staying in a B&B is it's like you have your own temporary local mother. When I'm in Ireland, way on the west coast of Ireland, where they stand on the bluff and they gaze out and they say, the next parish over is Boston, I'm staying with Kathleen Farrell. And she's all excited that Ricky from Seattle is here. And she runs out after me in the morning, where's your umbrella? You call yourself a travel writer, you're in Ireland, you don't have an umbrella, take mine and be back by 9 o'clock because Sean and the band are playing traditional music in the pub. You see, she cares about you. She's excited you're there. She's got a map on her refrigerator of the United States and she's colored in every state from where she's had a visitor. And she says, if you know anybody from Wyoming, they got a free bed right here. The more people you pack into the room, the cheaper it gets. Families, if you can get if you got 2 kids, get a triple and improvise the 4th bed. You'll save a lot of money rather than 2 doubles. A great option for people on a budget and for families is youth hostels. There are thousands of youth hostels in Europe offering amazing deals on beds. In a hostel, you don't pay for the room, you pay for the bed. Sometimes you can have 20 people in a room, sometimes you can have 2 or 4 people in a room. Usually they're institutional kind of places, the modern youth hostels, with institutional sort of industrial strength rooms. You get an instant circle of friends at a youth hostel. You get a kitchen where you can cook for the price of groceries. And I want to remind you, a lot of people go, youth hosteling, can we still do this? They took the word youth out of the system. Now it's called Hosteling International. You get a discount on the membership card if you're over 55. So when it comes to hosteling, if you are alive, you are young enough to hostel. All right? There's 2 IQs of European travelers, those who wait in lines and those who don't wait in lines. If you're waiting in line, frankly, you're messing up. My passion when I'm working on my guidebooks is to sort through those lines. All right? This is the Colosseum. These people are not waiting to get into the Colosseum. They're waiting to buy a ticket to get into the Colosseum. And there are lots of ways to get tickets without waiting in that line. That's your challenge. These people are leaving the Acropolis in Athens, and it's rush hour on the way out, and I'm heading in. You see, it's 4 o'clock. I would imagine 90% of those people leaving are all going back to their cruise ships. Think about ways to navigate around the crowds. We're all going to go to the Eiffel Tower. You can wait in a long line, or you can go right by that line and be escorted right to the front like I did, because I used a guidebook. A few days before, I made a reservation online. I had my appointment. I got there. I was ushered through that empty entryway, past all those stanchions. And then when I got up there, they took me immediately to the elevator, put me on, and I was up there. I had seen it and enjoyed it and got down before the people on the end of that line got to the elevator. When I was all done, I walked this entire line of tourists waiting to get up the Eiffel Tower. I looked at each one of them. Not one of them had the Rick Steves Paris guidebook. 2 IQs of European travelers, those who wait in lines and those who don't. My passion is to help people get around those lines. It's very realistic not to wait in those lines. You can make reservations. Going to Mad Ludwig's castle, you make a reservation for his dad's castle and his castle, you're in. Too many people drive from Munich all the way down to Fussen. They get there and they're told, sorry, we've allocated all of our tickets for today, come back tomorrow. That's a major mess up. You can avoid that. Remember, these days there's a lot of important sites that need reservations. Read your guidebook ahead. Also remember, you can pick up these museum passes. I love these museum passes. You visit, this is probably one of the most popular tips I give for traveling in Paris. Pick up the museum pass. It's expensive, but it pays for itself in 4 or 5 admissions. Let's say it's good for 4 days or whatever length you get. More than just economic, it lets you sightsee more because you don't consider how much does it cost. You're going to the Notre Dame, oh, there's the crypt. $10, doesn't matter, I've already got the pass. Go down and check it out. You wouldn't have done it otherwise, and it's a good thing to see. Most importantly, it lets you skip the lines. You've got that ticket, you walk right up to the turnstile, and you go in directly. You'll save lots of time at the Orsay, the Louvre, Versailles, the Sainte-Chapelle, and on and on. And remember, most of Europe has no tourists at all. In all my adult life, I've been reminding people, go where you're part of the party, not where you're part of the tourist crowd. And if you see 4 cute guys sitting on a bench, ask them to scoot over. I've been saying this for decades, and it works. You're right there. It's a quintessential European experience with the old boys watching the parade of life go by. If you don't know what to talk about, you can compare bushy eyebrows, okay? There's lots of things you can do. They'll never forget you. It's just an opportunity to connect with the locals. Hey, there's plenty of options. That's what's fun about traveling when you're planning your trip. You can take a tour, or you can go on your own. My passion is to equip independent-minded people to travel independently around Europe. And for me, it's just, my confidence is based on the feedback I get from people who went over there and had the time of their life. A lot of people wonder, can we do this at our age and so on? I think the most demanding thing about European travel physically is the heat and the crowds of summer. So if you're wondering, can we really do this? Go shoulder season and bundle up. It's much easier than with the crowded, sweaty middle of the season time. I'm very tuned in to my travelers, and if I was making it easier than it sounds, I'd get some complaints. It's so clear to me, if you want to travel this way, you can. I'm so inspired by people whose grandchildren said you shouldn't be doing this. They went over there, had the time of their lives, and came home with money in the bank for next summer's trip. You can travel this way, again, but you need to equip yourself with good information, expect yourself to travel smart, and you will. Embrace those experiences. To me, Europe is just full of unforgettable experiences. The culture is on display better than ever. There's a proud, proud tradition. There are artisans that want to show you their stuff. The coppersmith will be thrilled if you drop in. The vintners want you to test their latest. And the traditions are alive and well. The key for you is to get to Europe through the back door, to find those offbeat nooks and wonderful intimate crannies where you meet the people and enjoy Europe at its best. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope you have happy travels. Thanks a lot. Thank you. Thank you. That was a lot of fun.